DefineReal, moron, is the title of Espen Arseth's keynote lecture on game ontologies. This presentation is a pashashka about said lecture and is brought to you by Miss May. To begin, let's start by defining ontology. On page 55 of the 2009-2010 Digirect Keynote Lectures, it is recorded that Arseth introduced the dictionary definition of ontology as, quote, the study of being and existence, end quote, which is how the term is commonly used in the discourses of philosophy and metaphysics. Within the discourses of computer or information science, however, the definition is the description of a domain or universe of discourse and the relation of its parts. Arseth says that in order to study games, you really need both definitions. Now, if you'll forgive the pun, let's move on to the study of games. But before we can study games, we really need to define the term games. Defining the term games is a little interesting, though, in that different cultures use the term loosely to describe many things, including lotteries, online chats, live-action role-playing, gladiator games, parades, informational play, or informal play, and more. All of these uses fit snugly in the Latin term ludus, which Arseth says is derived from ludi romani and encompasses any performative entertainment. Our word ludicrous stemmed from ludus, and I'm betting ludus is also related to homo ludens, which means playing man, and ludic invention, which is covered in one of our later readings. Unlike the Romans, though, the academics have often tried to separate play or informal games and game or rule-based play so that they can make their related arguments. However, such behavior seems a bit Luddite-like to me, especially when we consider how our world is entering into the age of electricity, which is all about connecting. Arseth echoes Barton and Barton's ideology in the map when he further warns on page 53 that attempts to create a concrete definition causes different facets of game that were formerly included in the term to be excluded, and in a sense makes those facets ideologically homeless. As such, Arseth on page 54, quote, broadly defines games as facilitators that structure player behavior and whose main purpose is enjoyment, end quote, and then continues to say that game ontology is primarily a descriptive type of research that should also be able to support normative research. Such research builds necessary foundations for further comparison. Arseth proves this by stating how Anderson and Dill's comparison of Myst and Wolfenstein 3D is like comparing Sims to Fable or Jeopardy to chess. There are more differences between these two columns than what Anderson and Dill accounted for. If I understand page 56 correctly, Arseth is beginning to discuss some of the main computer or perhaps digital game ontologies, and says that he has developed an ontology with a more comprehensive, generative model and more clearly defined terms than Richard Ziegfeld's ontology. In addition to his ontology, Arseth introduced first the rock-paper-scissors ontology, which I have seen appear most obviously in the Kingdom Hearts, where near the beginning the player is given the chance to choose a sword, wand, or shield to get a tiny boost in either strength, magic, or defense, respectively. Then Arseth introduces Clabber's top-down actors, rules, and resources ontology, which I see in most digital role-play games, also known as digital RPGs. These games consist of a playable character or actor that interacts with other characters or actors, boundaries and/or rules that govern the possible action of a player, and resources such as magic points that the player must manage in order to succeed. Clabber's ontology has subfacets that allow for more focused classification, but deciding at which level one should stop breaking these subcategories into sub-subcategories is a problem faced by all ontologies. An additional problem with available ontologies is the fact that they themselves are rock, paper, scissors-like. Fast forward through the lecture slightly and we'll reach Arseth's concept of cybertext. Cybertext takes into account the hypertext code level and the semiotic GUI or graphic user interface level. This is based on the relationship between hypertext and hypotext, or hidden mechanical communications. What is left out of this diagram is what Arseth calls the game object. The game object is an in-game information object which the player interacts with to create gameplay. One of the most common game objects is the avatar, but clothing, weapons, money, and puzzle pieces can also be game objects. This is where reality comes back into play. Through our interactions with the game objects, we become Pavlov's dog. But if we participate, we are rewarded with points, the ability to explore new in-game locations and/or the next installment in the story until we are ultimately obsessed. I have no proof of this other than perhaps my own personal experience, but it seems to me that it is at this point that where the game becomes obsession that virtuality melts into reality, just as in books. When we get hooked, we overlook tiny imperfections and interface and gobble up the experience. This experience, whether spawned from books, films, games, or music, can lead to some particularly amusing and admittedly heated fights that attest to our perceptions of virtuality as reality. I don't condone these fights being beyond the point of amusement, but who's to say that it isn't reality? Because we agree to interact with the interface, we make the bartering of information real because it becomes a part of our story, our persona. This is why entertainment is one of 4 discourses of Ulmer's My Story. So the next time someone tells you it's only a story or it's only a game, it isn't real, show them the snazzy t-shirt that you bought online for $25.95. And thank you for watching my Pashashka.